It's now time to move on from cybersecurity and to talk about devices and some of these things that have real sensors that we need to verify. But I know it's now a great pleasure to welcome Tzach, who is CEO of CropX, to talk about the Internet of Soil. Tomer, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Sensor. Another talk about sensors. I guess this is what happens when you crossbreed a UFO with a baseball bat. And whoever falls asleep, I just throw this real accurately. I can hit from about 10 meters. So I arrived from Israel this morning. I run CropX, and we'll start with a short 2.5-minute movie, after which I'll have 7 minutes left to talk about the Internet of Soil, and we'll take it from there. Movie guy?
It's your land, and you know it better than anyone. Every crop, every ditch, every plant. You also know that adaptive irrigation is the key to getting the most out of your soil. These sensors give you the simplest, smartest, and best adaptive irrigation solution. It's completely do-it-yourself. You'll be up and running in no time. The revolutionary spiral design allows for easy installation and perfect results. It's irrigation with a difference. CropX combines advanced cloud technology with affordable sensors in the ground. Unique CropX technology scans your field and analyzes its different zones. The CropX mobile app directs you to the exact point in your field to place the sensor in the soil. Simply scan the QR code and the sensor automatically connects to the system, starts gathering data, and sending it to the cloud. Now that your fields are connected online, expect to receive texts from them. Your fields now have a voice.
So, Dad, what's your field saying today?
No need to water today. The CropX system automatically generates the optimal irrigation plan and sends it to the app for you to approve or modify. Adaptive irrigation works for me.
Hey, Dad, the field's texting you.
Yes, you can now tend to your field anywhere, anytime. Rest easy while CropX monitors your field and optimizes crop yields. Skeptical? Try it on just one pivot and see for yourself. CropX, the Internet of Soil.
So probably one of the hacker guys is going to come up and say how you can hack into this and destroy your crop. So this is kind of obvious. I mean, if you don't measure, you can't manage anything correctly. And this is something that we see with our customers every day. Right now, this is an irrigation sensor. It's a soil sensor, but we started with water, irrigating, providing recommendations for irrigation. And basically, we already see that we're changing the behavior of the customers by just providing real data. For example, a lot of our customers, farmers, used to irrigate for decades in a certain way. Let's say irrigating in a soil with a slope under the assumption that the water percolates and gets to the bottom of the root zone of the corn or potato, alfalfa, whatever. But at the end of the day, they put this in the field, and they saw that the water never gets to where they think it actually gets, because it just runs off. Okay, and that's just one very obvious, simple example. But there are so many other questions that a farmer can or needs to address on a daily basis. Okay, water is one, but there's fertilizer. Fertilizer, by the way, is by far the biggest expense on the farm. How to apply fertilizer to prevent runoff, for example. Runoff, it's just you apply fertilizer wrong, it's washed into the stream, the water stream, you get fined. That's a very costly and very environmental big question. And then we get into crop protection, pesticides, and so forth, and many other things. And the answer is here. It's in the soil. But the soil is, in Hebrew we say it's a balagan gadol. it's complex. Okay, there's so much going in there. It's practically a living organ. You have worms, you have insects, you have bacteria, you have carbon, you have minerals, you have water, you have everything. It's more or less like the human DNA, and even much more complex. So getting the data out of there, and not to say actionable data, is a huge challenge. And lastly, I think that the most, or it's probably worth noting that at this point, what we don't know is by far bigger, larger than what we do know about what's happening within the soil. So we're more or less at the Stone Age in that respect. When you look at what's out there today, what farmers do in order to get real insights about what's happening in their farm, soil samples, that's what's out there today. So you need to go, drive to your field, take a soil sample in a bucket, get that to the lab. You get the information back after a week. It applies to probably the 10 meters around where you took the sample. And it applies only to the day where you put the sample. I mean, that's not actionable data, definitely not something to build a system on, but that's what we have today. So we have a lot of companies that are trying to bypass that, essentially bringing data from above the soil, above the ground. And so all of these companies, for example, satellite companies, drones, UAVs, people that put cameras on weather stations, and essentially they all try to do the same thing, essentially hashing the same data, taking an image and trying to see based on that image what's happening underneath. So the main issue is by the time you see a change in the color of a leaf, the texture of the soil, the texture of the plant, something bad has already happened. Okay, it's too little, too late. It's reactive. It's like looking in the rearview mirror, and that's to compare with companies that are trying to really extract data from within the soil, which is much more challenging and much more difficult. Challenges, just let's talk about a few of those. So first of all, we need to be able to sense a lot of things. Okay, so water sensors, more or less standard technology. There are quite a few of them out there. We'll talk about price in a minute, but that kind of already exists. But what about nitrogen sensing, real-time nitrogen sensing, a huge expense on the farm, and carbon, and then we go into pesticides and stuff like that. The sensing technology doesn't even exist for many of these items. But even if we did or have the ability to sense all of those things, now there's a challenge of getting that data out of the field and into the cloud, and then back to the farmer, into the app or the iPhone, the Android device or whatever, in order to make that actionable and make that, just save the farmer money. Now, just a few things that we have to overcome. For example, most of these are transmitting from the middle of nowhere. So you don't have 4G, you don't have 3G. Many times we need to downgrade our transmission into SMS just to get the data out of the field. And this even happens below 10 feet of corn. I mean, that essentially blocks everything. So those are just a few challenging from the transmission side. And then you need to get that, once you get that into the app, now you really need to provide concise, informative data that the farmer can use, and not just say, okay, here's a graph, do with it whatever you want. But he needs to, I mean, like all of us, okay, we want very clear data, actionable data at the right time. So there are many challenges in that respect. And this slide's come to give us a historical perspective and perhaps to kind of help us understand where we're going and where we're taking this. So this is a 60-second historical high school class now. About 10,000 years ago, we started with agricultural revolution. Okay, and that was essentially when people stopped collecting crop, and started growing them and cultivating, and that was kind of the start of it. That happened for about almost 10,000 years, and until 200 years ago, we started the Industrial Revolution, essentially replacing labor and people with machinery. And then about 100 years ago, we had the Chemical Revolution. Chemical Revolution started companies, huge giants, tens of billions of dollars of companies such as Monsanto and BASF, essentially creating chemicals, fertilizer, Roundup, stuff like that. And that brought us to the fourth revolution, the genetical revolution, generating companies such as Syngenta, another huge giant, essentially working on the genetics of seeds and crops, and just being able to get more and more yield out of one single seed. The informational revolution is where we're at today, okay? And the Internet of Soil, the Internet of Things is just one piece of that puzzle, okay? You have big data going into there. You have machine learning capabilities. So you have sensing, you have connectivity. The Internet of Soil, that's connecting all of these data points into an ag analytical system, and eventually the idea is to be able to provide actionable data. So that's where we're at right now. So looking forward, water is just the start. The idea is to eventually provide real-time measurement for everything, and I discussed fertilizer. By the way, in terms of just market size, just so you know, fertilizer is, first of all, in terms of dollar value, by far the largest expense on any farm. But other than that, it's just a much, much bigger market, because if you look at the United States, for example, about half of the farms are irrigated, half are not, because they don't need to, because they're in rainy areas, but everybody uses fertilizer. So sensing fertilizer is key, and has a huge demand from the farmers and from the growers. So that's another example. In addition to that, there's a lot of sensing that's required, what we call under canopy sensing. For example, the ability to sense soil or air moisture just above the ground. That gives an indication for what you would call leaf wetness, which is a one-to-one direct parameter that talks about crop disease and so forth. So there are many. We're looking at adding and further developing our sensing capabilities with time. That's one thing. And then there's the connectivity issue and so forth. So all of this, at the end of the day, is to provide a better future to all of us. Essentially, the main idea is to increase yield. I'm sure you're all aware of the macroeconomical kind of trends and all of the statistics saying that by 2050, we're going to have to feed twice as many people. And these are exactly what all of these revolutions are doing, essentially bringing or helping us get twice and thrice more yield out of each and every acre. And this is what this is all about. I have 50 more seconds, so if you want any questions or something, I guess I talked really fast. This is a good question. Basically, because of what you saw in the movie, we have that algorithmical thing that kind of does a topographical analysis of the field, and therefore is able to recognize where are the optimal points to put sensors. So essentially, one of this can cover about 40 acres, and by that you save a lot of money.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tomer. Thank you very much for a fantastic talk.